South Africa's latest renewable energy grid survey revealed that some 134,000 megawatts of renewable energy power were looking to access the national grid in 2024. That's more than double the 66,000 megawatts reported in 2023. Meanwhile, of these projects, some 60,000 megawatts are expected to come online within the next 3 to 5 years. But as has been well publicized, the country's electricity transmission network will need to be brought up to speed to be able to carry all this planned capacity going forward. Well, to discuss what these numbers mean and the expected progress in developing the country's transmission network, I'm joined by Ronald Marais. He's the Transmission Strategic Grid Planning Manager at the National Transmission Company of South Africa. Ronald, thank you very much for joining us. So, of course, what can you tell us about what the key findings were of this renewable energy grid survey? What did it tell us?
Well, I think just a quick background is it's really important to understand that the Renewable Energy Survey is a collaborative event that happens annually with the renewable associations. And it tells us where we should build the grid. It gives us information of where people seek access to the grid and how we should develop our assumptions in the grid planning to ensure that this access is developed over time.
Yeah, so Ronald, sorry, just to interject, we have a graphic up that you've provided to us that you can speak to, which speaks about the results summary around 2024 vis-a-vis 2023.
Yes, so thank you. On the left-hand side, you'll see the fantastic contributions that we received this year, more than double of last year. And at the lower part, you'll see the Renewable Association, significant contributions for them and others, which is fantastic news as we get great insights. In the center, you see the connected capacity. This is the capacity people want on the grid, has increased from 66,000 to about 133,000 megawatts, which is also a great insight in terms of where people want. That capacity is slightly different from the installed capacity, just below those items, and that the installed capacity is often a combination of batteries and PV or wind or PV at their site, but not necessarily all coming onto the grid. And that's the distinction between the installed capacity and the connected capacity. We see that the battery sizes, the volume that the battery wants is more or less the same. This is expressed in that megawatt hours of the batteries, but slightly lower, we'll see the battery sizes are significantly bigger. And what this tells us is that they see the volumes of batteries still needed the same, but they want to inject more of that power more rapidly into the grid, which is useful information to have. Large volumes increase in PV and wind, with very little increase in concentrated solar power at the bottom and hydropower. It also gives us fantastic insights of the readiness of the projects. And on the right-hand side, you'll see we categorize the projects into type A, B, and C, where type A are projects that have got a lot of their authorizations already and almost ready to go in the next 3 to 5 years. Type B have submitted their documentation but not received it all, and C is aspirational. So we can see in all three categories a significant increase, particularly in the near-term access required to the grid.
Yeah. Ronald, I wanted to ask you very quickly as we look at the next slide. Geographically speaking, where are all these IPP or renewable energy projects actually based?
Yes, and that's a great question, because the grid access requires to know where exactly we need to strengthen the grid. And so in the survey, we request the actual locations of the strengthening. And what can be seen here in the green bubbles is where the wind would like to come. The size of the bubble indicates the volumes that are required. The yellow bubbles show the solar inputs, and the other multicolored ones is combinations of plant, of solar, wind, and various bubbles. And this map is an interactive map. The website is shown in the top right-hand corner, and people can go and interrogate this data to see the insights for themselves as well.
Yeah. So, Ronald, let's come back to your role. You're at the new Transmission Company of South Africa. What is it what role is this new company going to have in ensuring that all of this planned power actually gets onto grid? We know that there's a lot of investment that needs to happen. The Electricity and Energy Minister has been telling us this time and time again.
Yes, and I think the new entity is being created for exactly that focus. I think you perhaps have heard the statement that says there is no transition without transmission. And this is very accurate. You can see the wide spread of the spatial requirements. And the transmission, the NTCSA, is there to facilitate and focus on delivering the access and the rollout of the grid. And inputs from the survey like this provide us with a focus on where the access that people want is required and helps us prioritize the rollout of the grid.
So we're often told that it's increasingly becoming cheaper to produce renewable energy. But of course, with the transmission investment now needed, that's going to be billions, maybe trillions, I don't know how much, but it's going to be quite a lot. Does that mean that the South African consumer at the end of the line is still going to be having to pay higher electricity prices going forward, or at least in the short to medium term?
Yes, I think whenever you invest new infrastructure, there is price pressures. But I think when you look on the transmission aspect of it, it is relatively a small component of the overall cost. It's less than 10% of the overall tariff. And the value of it, as you can see, the volumes of competition that are released by having a greater grid. And the competition is for the more pricey energy, which really covers about 90% of the cost of the tariff. So by investing in the transmission, it really unlocks the ability for greater competition in the energy side. And that's where you want to get the greater reduction in costs. Yeah.
So as IPPs start producing their planned output in alignment with transmission lines in expansion in readiness to support economic growth, do you think that we're going to see a growth in battery storage? You did touch on it earlier. And also, isn't there a danger that as we overcompensate, after the trauma of load shedding, that we're going to have a situation where we have too much energy available? And if that does happen, what does that then mean for the producers thereof?
Yeah, a very relevant question. The batteries are important. With increased renewables, which are variable by nature, you need to have increased flexibility to deal with this variability. And the batteries provide an improved ability to manage this with other technologies as well, like gas and so forth. So having a combination of this to manage it is really important. If you look at the volumes that you can see, the 133 gigawatts, this is significantly above even the 2040 levels that have been identified in many, many studies. So this is not a bad thing. It shows that there's increased competition, but it is unlikely that all of them will result on the grid. There's simply not enough market capacity. And in this regard, this is where tariffs and tariff restructuring becomes important, and market signals to give the right signals regarding to how capacitated the energy landscape is.
Ronald, thank you very much for your insights, sir. That was Ronald Marais. He's the Transmission Strategic Grid Planning Manager at the National Transmission Company of South Africa.